introducing Nadia, and I just want to give you guys an idea of the structure of the talk. So the idea is that brief intros, a few questions from my side to Nadia, and since we have such a massive, diverse audience, we'll leave the last 25 minutes for questions from you, or that I'm sure you have for Professor Horning. And as I said, my name is Mzwagiti. I come from Swaziland, but I usually say South Africa since most people don't know where Swaziland is, and for the right reasons. Why would you know where Swaziland is? I'm a senior IPE major. I'm currently working on a thesis with both Professor Horning and Aisha that just got its first draft due date postponed to next week Friday. It was supposed to be this week Friday, so I'm in an excellent mood today. And then moving on to our guest of honor, Professor Horning. So she reminded me to summarize her CV briefly and not summarize it at length. So this is what I'll say. Professor Horning comes from Madagascar, the land famous for its vanilla, lemurs, and long last names. And she's of mixed Malagasy and French descent. And she moved to France at the age of 12, where she went to a very, very prestigious high school. And she rubbed shoulders with, then unknowingly to her, the daughters of famous African statesmen. At age 18, she moved to the United States, where she completed her BA at George Mason University in 1990, and then in 1992 completed her master's, and in 1998 completed her master's in the Department of Government at Cornell University, from which she would go on to earn her PhD in 2004, Cornell University. And she's been with us here at Middlebury College since 2002, so about 14 years. And I think that's a great job of summarizing briefly. In terms of her publications, I'll say she's been published both in English and French in prestigious poli-sci journals, and she's also gone on to talk more at length about conservation politics in Africa. We all know Africa is the continent with the world's wealth. We enjoy some of its products in our luxury iPhones, etc. But it's also got many challenges in as far as conserving its natural resources. And Professor Horning has really been involved in that movement of bringing higher consciousness around that. So, moving on to the question that brings us all here today, and I think I should face you to some extent. I guess the first question I have for you is, what matters to you and why?
If only I knew. There's nothing, until you are sitting in this chair, you don't realize how difficult it is to answer that question. But I welcome the challenge. I welcome the opportunity to reflect upon essentially who I am. If I think about what matters to me, it means who do I think I am? And I'm hoping to skip the why, so I'm going to use, please ask a question so I don't have to say why.
All right.
Okay?
Yes, I have a copy installed.
But I would say that, like Gabby mentioned last time at this occasion, she said that the answer to that question depends on where you are in life, depends on how old you are, where you've been, and so on and so forth. So I think she was absolutely right about that. And I'm reflecting on this based on a longer period than she did, because she is a student at Middlebury College, and much as I wish I were that young, I seem to am not. So for me, what matters to me is not to me. And it is particularly uncomfortable to sit here and have everybody's eyes focused on myself. And I think there are two reasons for that. One is because I don't think what matters is me. And the second reason is because in my culture, it is very impolite to do what I'm doing right now. And so it's culturally uncomfortable to monopolize the spotlight. And it's simply not part of my personality. So I just want you to understand that I'm in tremendous pain right now. So why do I say that what matters to me is not me? It's simply because having traveled to different places around the world, having experienced different cultures around the world, not that many, but enough for me to appreciate the variation, I've noted that what the parts of the world that I have lived in, people value their accomplishments, or they assess their self-worth with two major things that I could observe. One is the ability to accumulate, and I'm not just talking about material goods, but accumulate accomplishments. So productivity is measured in terms of number of things that you've done, number of publications, number of students you attract, number of this and that. So it's and then of course there's the accumulation of material things, such as obviously iPhones. I don't have one, but anyway. So there's, I guess those are the two things really: the culture, the appreciation of accumulation, and also very related to that, productivity. Meaning, the more we do, the busier we are, we pretend to be, the better we are. We feel good about ourselves. And I can tell you that I don't subscribe to that at all. I've fallen into the trap. I've played the game, and I've come to conclude that that is not something that I think defines my worth, and it's not something that I admire. Sometimes I respect it, but not automatically. Depends on what you do. So how does all of this connect to the idea of what matters to me is not me? It has made me think about what I am here for. It's made me think about why am I teaching for, or why am I living for? And the answer to that has become clearer and clearer, which is that I think that I define my worth according to my ability to be of use and service to others. It's as simple as that. It begins with being a mother. I define myself and my worth, with the fact that I am a mother. And there's something also cultural, I think, about that, because when I grew up, I noticed that, or actually it's just not a matter of noticing, but I practiced something, which is that when your fellow schoolmates meet your parents, they refer to you as Mama and so-and-so. They don't say Mrs. So-and-so, or they don't, certainly not your first name, but they say Mama and so-and-so. And I just thought that was just the way you do things, but when I became a mother, I realized that my function, my whole being, is defined in terms of being this helpless thing's mother, which was tolerable when they were helpless, but not at the adolescents and young adults. I'm thinking more about self-preservation and preserving them. Murder, she wrote. Anyway, that's a note aside. But anyway, so this is the first time I realized that I need to rethink my function and my purposes when I became a mother. And I just thought, wow, this really changes everything. And it did. What your body does, what you're preoccupied with, and so on and so forth, transposed. I cannot say that about fathers because I'm not one, but I'm guessing that there's something equivalent there as well. So that's that. But then motherhood expanded to include other young people. So now I'm going into the teacher part. Is that so my function is not, frankly, I see myself as a vehicle to enable young minds, so that would be students, to find their purpose in life, their passion in life, to discover, to go beyond facts and, smart analyses and so on and so forth, but really to think about or rethink about the world that they live in. So this is where I'm at right now. So the me then still needs to exist, but it has a particular purpose, which is to serve others. And the others, start with the children, the students, and now I've actually scaled up, as they say, to the continent of Africa. Does that answer the question? Does it? All right. Are you happy? Because you were happy with your introduction, so I just wanted to make sure. You're happy with my answer. Because we want to keep you in a good mood today.
Actually, it's in the tables here. So you just touched on your relationship to the continent. Now, I've had the experience of working with you in a startup university, African Leadership University, which is, for those who don't know, Fred Sonica graced us with his presence 2 years ago when he was announcing the setup of African Leadership University, which is essentially the continent's first private Pan-African entrepreneurship university. And he studied it in Mauritius. And Nadia was there this JTEM, and I was her teaching assistant. And as one African living in the US to another African living in the US, I'm curious about your relationship, how your relationship with the African continent has evolved over time.
Well, I was born there, so there's that relationship. And then I left it, which was, I guess, second to, after my father's death, was the most painful experience I've ever gone through. So you said I left when I was 12 years old. I left the land of what? Vanilla what?
Lemurs.
Lemurs. Oh, Professor Stenger will remind me.
And long last names.
And long last names. So yeah, I had to go to places where they had short names. It was very painful. So what was I talking about? Sorry, I was born there and I left the continent, and then I got busy, like most young people are, trying again, playing the game, embracing the system, and so on and so forth. And then when I finished my undergrad, I had the opportunity and the desire to go back to Madagascar to do some research. It was vaguely defined about something that would be good. So I went to Madagascar and was thrown into, initially I was interested in development. And I think that this interest in development was simply a psychological reaction to the pain I experienced when I left my country and my family at age 12. What I mean by that is that in order to, how we develop coping mechanisms, and sometimes we think and do the strangest things, just to nurture our denial. Sometimes that's what it is. Anyway, for me, I said that the only reason I was going through this pain is because I was going to come back. And so there had to be a good reason to leave, which was to get a good education, and then I would come back and hopefully affect positive change in the lives of people I had come to know, love, and realize were not as lucky as I was in their upbringing. So it was always in the back of my mind that I'm going back to the continent. And so many years later, I've obviously failed to do that. And so that's why I'm working with ALU, because it is my way of going back. So anyway, but the first time I went back to think significantly or meaningfully about things was when I went to do research and ended up working with farmers, hundreds of them, talking about the tensions between agricultural production and resource conservation. And that's how I myself became interested in forest conservation, which then later on defined my academic career. So that was, so there was constantly a relationship between myself and Madagascar, and it's still there, obviously. But it has expanded, like I said, it has really gone from Madagascar to the rest of the continent. And so how did that happen? It honestly happened when I arrived at Cornell University for my graduate studies and realized that no one was studying Africa. And it's not that I walked in there being interested in Africa, but I just noticed, said, wait a minute, there's Latin America, there's this and that. Where is Africa? And they said, oh, it's out there, you know, there's a center. If you use your binoculars, you might see that over there's those people who look different, and that's where they do things. So I thought, oh, well, that's too big a hike, and I'm just going to do my conventional poli-sci mainstream stuff. So, but I was intrigued by that, the absence of an Africanist in government. Thankfully, they've changed that. And then when I studied at Middlebury College, whereas I felt trained in comparative politics and natural resource management, my colleagues in the department were quite encouraging of, you know, covering a gap, a curricular gap, which was Africa. And I sat there thinking, what do I know about Africa? And I haven't had a chance to study Africa, so, you know, I cannot do it. So I learned on the job. And that probably is thanks to the opportunity that my department gave me, and of course the opportunity that the college gave me, I was able to move beyond Madagascar and actually think, so to say, continentally. And so that's the evolution of my relationship with the continent. So, and I'm getting, so yeah, I would say that this relationship, as you call it, has been going on for 15 years, maybe?
So I guess my next question zones in on the classroom experience. So you are teaching Africans and non-Africans alike about the African continent, as someone who had very little education about the African continent until I came to Middlebury College, which is quite ironic.
What were you busy studying then?
That's a whole different
Africa?
issue. I knew way more about the first and second, the causes of the First and Second World War than I knew about the causes of colonization in Southern Africa. But you've always mentioned this since when I walked into office hour experiences, and you talk about the beauty of when it clicks to students, like that light bulb moment. Could you talk more about those in your classroom experiences as you've been teaching students about the African continent? Just your joys from that experience.
Doesn't that require memory? Right now I'm feeling uncomfortable. Okay, so light bulb moments for my students? All right, I would say that let's start with Africa and then just move beyond. African politics, I think that one of the joys I have experienced has to do with Africans taking the course and ending up telling me at the end of the course, I had no idea. And of course it resonates with my own experience because I had no idea either. So it's gratifying to expand their horizon beyond the confines of their own, you know, their nation state or their culture in Africa. So that's that. As for non-Africans, it truly, and I'm not trying to be cute or anything, but it is just wonderful to watch them listening to lecture and going like this. What's next? And then what did he do? It's really very much like that. And then we get into the theory and we go, just, you know, if it makes you happy, just keep talking, but tell us about these experiences. So that really is a constant. Just like the fact that, you know, they are at every moment they are discovering, they're learning, and they're finding it so thrilling or, you know, exciting. That's what that happens all the time. Now, outside of Africa, when I teach comparative politics, which by the way is probably the toughest class to teach, Intro to Comparative Politics, and only fools such as myself do it. And smart people know better than to do it. We really are made fun of. You think I'm joking, but it just go, wow. Or it's like, thank you. Thank you. You're so stupid. And the worst part is I enjoy it. So it's but seriously, it's horrible to teach. Because students just don't, get excited. So, you go from Africa to comparative politics, and it's just like two worlds. Like, oh, come on, we can do it. But in that particular class, an exciting moment was when we talk about, I introduced them to the concept of totalitarianism, looking at the case of North Korea. And they watched a documentary called, I forget right now, it's about mass games and anyway, totalitarianism. And they come back from the film, and I asked them about the means that the state uses to indoctrinate citizens. And they just, especially the Americans, oh, this is unbelievable, you do this, and the DQC, oh, he did this, and that, and all that. And they just sit there patiently. And once the list is exhausted, I turn to them again and I say, might there be ways in which we here in the West or in the United States are also victims of indoctrination? And it's just hilarious, because then you have the internationals. I got this. And then I sit there going, oh boy. And you do all of this quietly and seriously. And I get all excited. So that's really fun. And then another particular time was when I was, I also like it when they hijack my lecture. Oh. My students. Oh, and a lot have. You're just like, yo, whatever, lady, whatever you want to talk about, but we're on to this. You just said something, and we want to talk about it. And then, so of course, when they hijack, I have to get back because we have a program. So, I really still have 3 bullet points here in 12 minutes, so you're going to take these bullets before I leave, and then they say, okay, let's just do it. So they listened to me for 12 minutes, and one day a student got up at the end of class and said, okay guys, proctor, right now. Wow, that's And by the way, they didn't invite me to do that.
Right, so my last question for you, before I open it up to the rest of the audience, is recently there's been a lot of talk on campus, especially last semester, I'd say, about the idea of slow learning, which John wrote a campus article about it.
Slow learning, is there any other way? I mean, for me, that's redundant. But
right.
What is slow learning?
You weren't kidding about this. No, I think that maybe a reaction to the following exchange that happens too often on this campus. So what I'm about to share, I think, is illustrative of maybe a broader cultural challenge we have about going too fast. So one faculty is walking, down, from the library, sees another faculty. How are you? So I would see Allison, I say, how are you? And her response would be, busy.
I never say that.
You don't. She's my mentor.
I hate that.
Well, that's why Michael says it all the time. He's really No, so in other words, I'm Allison, I hate that, and I hear it way too often, and I think it's emblematic of a culture where, at our worst, we have too much on the syllabus. Students are committing to too many extracurriculars. We're not getting enough sleep. I mean, it's sort of obvious when you think about it. So I think that we're at a place now where we need to really actively think about slowing down. And I see mindfulness practices that a lot of our colleagues are doing. So that's kind of the general idea. Yeah, in a nutshell.
Just take a deep breath.
Yeah,
and
literally.
stop being busy.
That's right. Exactly.
And my
So,
question
you were
to
asking?
Yes, the question was, how have you incorporated that philosophy into your interactions with students on campus?
Moment of deep embarrassment. How I have actually, first of all, let me first say that I'm guilty as anyone of overloading, overpacking my courses and thinking that my students should know everything I think they should know, period. So, partly because, you know, when you do comparative politics, you are dealing with the world. And when you do Africa, you are dealing with, okay, 53 countries, sub-Saharan, you eliminate 5, you're still stuck with 49, you know, it's always overwhelming, whatever I teach. So, how have I incorporated? Yes, I've made a conscious effort in reaction and recognized that I myself do not enjoy being like a rodent on a wheel, you know, running aimlessly for who knows what, you know. I have made a conscious effort to feel the pulse of my classes and ask my students, how are you feeling? Where are you right now? Is it a hell week we're dealing with? Do you need to slow down? I'm not wedded to the syllabus, you know, and so on and so forth. I've also encouraged them. I've bartered with them. I tell them, if you go to Angelique Kidjo's concert, you know, you get something from me, which is, you know, either we don't do discussion section, or you get an extra 2 weeks on your paper. You know, I've done all of those very manipulative things. Yeah,
One of the few people that can make that joke.
Legitimately. Truthfully. So yes, I have tried to be, I've tried to be sensitive to, I mean, basically, I don't know if, for those of you who teach, you know, I'm not sure about you, but it's absolutely dreadful to teach zombies. It's dreadful. Because you just feel like you are engaged in waterboarding and you're inflicting pain and all that. It's just not good. So, and it's also not, oh gosh, am I going to use the word? It's not productive. So it's not productive, and so therefore I try to communicate with them. But I have to say that despite my effort to communicate with them and try to accommodate where they're at, they don't necessarily reciprocate, because there's this culture of perfection at Middlebury College, where, you know, you can say beyond Middlebury, but let's just talk about what we know. Whereas it's embarrassing to show weakness, to show slowness, and so on and so forth. So it's not just a matter of me trying to incorporate that concept into the way I behave in the classroom. It's also a matter of them being willing to embrace the opportunity. And sometimes I ask my students, what would you like the exam to be on? So I give them power to go back to being a political scientist, and they don't take it. I just go, wow, I'd be all over that one. Law, it's called lobbying. But there's this standoffish behavior that makes me feel like a fool on more than one occasion. That's just the way it is. And they probably think I'm trying to trap them, you know, like, surely she's not being kind. Surely she's not being accommodating. She just wants to know who's exhausted.
Read out the week.
Okay.
All right. Now I'll open it up to questions that you guys might have for Professor Horning.
One at a time, please.
Hi, it's nice to be here with you and to be listening to you. I remember when a few years ago you went back to Africa, in Tanzania, I think, and Uganda. You took your family and spent a whole year there doing research and perhaps even some teaching. What was that like, coming back and immersing yourself there for a year with your family? What was the
It
upshot
was-
of that?
Thank you. It was magical. First of all, even though I have sworn I'll never go back to Tanzania to work, I'll say openly that it was probably the best place to go with my family and to expose the children to the continent. So what was it like? It was, I'm saying that it was magical, first of all, because of the beauty of the place. But then again, I think all places are beautiful, including where we are. So it's breathtakingly beautiful. But over there, of course, it's beautiful in a different way, or different ways, I should say. And what was magic about it was that we did do, because we had no choice, we practiced slow learning. Now that I'm getting a gist of this, I think. And so what we did as a family is we discovered the simple pleasures. And going out for pizza on Friday was truly a big deal. I even put makeup on. To go to Dragonairs in Morogoro, Tanzania, for pizza. Paid attention to my dress, and it was great. So it's something to look forward to. And the other pleasure we experienced, because we were not bombarded by, media and so on. We purposefully limited access to, media and all, mostly because, Swahili wasn't going to serve us too well. Programs in Swahili. Anyway, the pleasure I remember going through was to be on I think it was a queen-size bed, the four of us, with, of course, the inevitable net. Even though we all got malaria in the end, except for my husband. But anyway, and watching reruns of X-Files, on CDs that my husband had brought back from Vietnam, and just wondering if we should go for what, another one, one more. And really, those two experiences, in addition to discovering, the great national parks and so on and so forth, were absolutely magic. And so it was refreshing. And of course, I won't talk about the research and how, how eye-opening it was, just again to go beyond Madagascar and begin to wonder to what extent Tanzania's experiences with resource management were similar to those of Madagascar and Uganda and Kenya and so on. So, does that answer your question? Yeah, so it was really wonderful.
So you talked about one of your goals being to go to Europe to get your education, work on that, play the game a little bit in that sense, to be productive and be focused on achievement. But then, you're also talking, we've also been talking a little bit about students here and stress and playing the game. Do you think that it's almost inevitable that if you have this goal, a goal that was, noble like yours in a way to go and bring that change in your home country, do you think it's inevitable that you have to play the game, or is there a way to limit the game mentality?
Yeah, I think the term inevitable might be too strong, but when you're young, when you have a young mind, you simply don't know better. So had I left Madagascar at my age now and pursued the same pursuits, I think I would have gone about it differently. But then, just that it is for you, when you give yourself a huge lofty goal, which is to do something about the country's development, or political change, or whatever you have in mind, I guess you have to equip yourself. And Zoa and I have had this conversation on several occasions, which is that, you can be keen, you do want to affect change and all that, but it's different from being prepared, and it's certainly different from being ready. So when you want to affect positive change, or negative, I suppose, but we'll talk about that. When you want to affect change, you really need to ask yourself, am I keen, am I prepared, and am I ready? And only at that point can you hope realistically to affect positive change. And so, to get to that particular point, as I think I have with African Leadership University, you really have to go through the through the period. I think of it as being formative. You're conditioned to advance. So for instance, if you want to, you have to learn a foreign language in order to go to a particular place in the world and either interact or affect change or whatever you want to do. In that case, yeah, it's inevitable to take the grueling language courses, play the game, be busy learning the language, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I think that to be prepared, it's necessary. Not inevitable, but necessary to, as you say, as I said, play the game. However, that's only for those of us who cannot think beyond that. But surely there are some young people out there who can know better than to fall into what I call the trap of excellence that we have here. So, what are those traps? I mean, we have. I guess, I would say that we have faulty measures of accomplishment. And I think I tried to make that point earlier in terms of reflecting upon my life, but what is it we want? We want to get into the quote unquote best schools on the land, not wondering who defines what's best or what's good, especially for self. So we compete, frantically to get into these schools, and then once we are in these schools, we behave like everybody else, which means that we are type A, messed up secretly. But the reward is the ability to say, well, I attended these schools, which cost a lot of money or a lot of sweat or a lot of time, whatever it is that, resources that you expend. So, anyway, all this to say that, who am I to say if it's inevitable or not, since I don't know, or I didn't know better.
So I know we talked a little bit about how we're becoming a culture that's becoming busier and busier as we speak, and I can see that with my younger brother and sister, how they're testing for schools even though they're only in second grade. And so what effect do you think that's going to have in the future? If we're starting out younger and having selective enrollment for even these schools, how is that going to affect us in the future?
Well, I can tell you that it's not going to make us a better society or a better community wherever we end up going, because the more you engage in those pursuits, the less you pay attention to each other, and the less you value the slowness of paying attention to each other. So you end up doing things like we do regularly. Oh, I miss you, let's spend time together, and then that just, in some ways, signaling to colleague or friend that we don't value spending time with them, when we might, and I do, because when I say to a colleague or a friend, I miss you, I mean it. I really miss, and whatever it is, your humor, your abuse, your whatever it is that's in a person. But that's because, we're busy pursuing the wrong goal. So to go back to your question, I think that it will lead to a very individualized culture, an atomized society, and a bunch of people who are probably going to major in religion or philosophy because they have completely lost a sense of purpose other than to achieve the next goal, which is measurable. And so those would be my predictions. And in fact, I think we're already experiencing that, truth be told. Now, from the standpoint of a teacher, we are going to get more and more formatted classes. Sometimes, I look at my students, and if you look at them individually and you look at their names, there's variation there. But sometimes the behavior reminds me of a computer keyboard, where they're they all look the same, they're designed the same, they just have different letters and numbers on them, so they're not quite the same, but still as the recipient, of their presence, you see. And so from one year to the next or semester to the next, it's just like a bunch of keyboards. And that is because our society, with the values that it imposes on us, formats us to become bricks. And to lose sight of, and to become like each other, instead of different and enjoyable, if you will. So, does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Not exactly optimistic, but, but so the question I would have for you youngsters is, what do you propose to do to change that?
You used to,
Yeah.
Nadia, if I could jump in, you used three words: keen, prepared, and ready. Tell us about keen. You used the word twice. When you
Right.
think about a student or a person being keen,
Yeah.
share with us what that's about. Sounds cool.
I'll give you my prototypical student who comes to African government senior seminar, and by gosh, I gotta figure out what's going on in Africa because I'm going to help. Oh yeah, I've heard it. Why are you taking this class? Well, because I'm gonna go help Africans. And I'm sure you've experienced it, right? Okay, so it's really not, there's this immediate, urge and keenness to go help Africa. And in my own experience, let me leave Madagascar so that I can go back and do something about what I think is wrong with my society. So there was keenness there. But there was no preparedness. So it's all like, this is like not the head speaking, but the heart speaking. So your heart is in the right place, perhaps, because I value paying attention to others, but you're not equipped. You haven't even solved your own little, scheduled problems here. And you need to tell me that you're going to go help Africans. And I'm this old, and I'm finally figuring out what I have to offer Africa, which has something to do with being an educator. Duh. And so that's it.
So if I can follow up then, so take that hypothetical student you mentioned, keen, I want to save the world. If we do our job right, we faculty and staff,
Yes.
and if the community, furthermore, does its job in a certain sense, what is that student's perspective 3.5 years later or 4 years later when they graduate? We really get it right on behalf of that student, with that student. How has that keenness changed, if at all?
Yeah, I'm hoping, like you said, it's if we do our job right.
Right.
And if the student is receptive. First of all, I think the student would be much more humble and realistic about what slither of African problems, or any problems of the world, they can actually tackle, because they have equipped themselves intellectually and with particular skills, and that's the whole model at ALU. They have equipped themselves to understand their own limitations, but also the opportunities, their own resources, what they can offer essentially, and what they cannot offer, a particular project, a particular endeavor, a particular enterprise. So yes, I would say that, going from the, out of control, excited individual, and thank goodness for them, because we do need idealism. We would have someone who's more focused, not less determined, but certainly, better focused, I would say, or completely discouraged. And we're pretty good at that, John. Like, something's wrong with the world. Let's analyze it.
Yeah.
Now, we all know why everything is wrong with the world, and we can articulate it quite well. But then, so what? Or now what? So in some ways, and that, I would definitely accept, the CSE and mid-core. But for, those of us who are conventional teachers, quite frankly, we abandon the kids at the moment of anxiety. And we reward them with good grades if they can actually tell us, what is wrong with this or that, or And then we confer degrees upon them, and we tell them, pay attention to how many people who give the commencement speech. We always say good luck and go out there, be strong, be excited. We've completely destroyed their ability to say anything positive about what we're doing around the world. So anyway, I just find that ironic. But again, that's not all of us. I think that some of us do a better job satisfying that need that students have to do something about the world in which they live. The world being their own communities. It could be Middlebury College, it could be an organization, or it could be the world, complete, in its entirety.
Any other questions?
What is something you're currently very, very interested in and passionate about?
Well, running away from my kids is probably the answer. And this is how I'm doing it. I'm pretending to have a passion elsewhere. And I get on the plane and I go work at African Leadership University in Mauritius. It all looks legit. And when I come back, everybody says, "You look great." I go, "Yep." Anyway, so the passion I have right now really has to do with working with that particular institution. And why is that of any interest? One is because it's different. The pedagogical model, the learning model, everything is different, so it's exciting because it's new for me. And it's challenging because, I'm so set in my ways of teaching, so I welcome the challenge. The other thing I welcome is the built-in diversity that there is in the institution. It's a pan-African, so granted they're all African, but Africa is so vast that it makes for a very diverse body of students. So, that is really exciting. And quite frankly, you really have a sense, you have the sentiment that, you have a sense of purpose and can really affect change on the continent through these extraordinary students. It's also true of Middlebury students, teaching is such a privilege. Okay, that's not what I say when I'm grading. There's no privilege there. But teaching is such a privilege and it also is so wonderful because it gives you hope. Sometimes because what you feel like you failed, maybe this guy is going to take care of, and you should say, wasn't me, but somebody's going to do something about that. So it's very gratifying that way, exciting. But that's really what it is. Working for or with ALU is right now what excites me. But there's more to come. But that's the best way to be away from the kids. So it's great. It serves two purposes.
All right. I was just looking at the time, and I wanted to thank you all for coming through and sticking around with us. And thank you to Nadia for sharing her thoughts with us.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.